Hello, and welcome back to Ambitious. So, I could not be more excited for today's topic. I feel like I say that every week. I feel like I might say that every week. But it's true. A lot of these topics I get really jazzed, I get really psyched to dive into, but today kind of hits on my heartstrings if I'm going to be honest with you, because if you know me, you know that my journey really into the online space started in the high ticket world. And that's when I was a high ticket phone closer. It's something that I have always just loved talking about. I've loved the exploration of sales. I've loved kind of the evolution of my relationship with it as well. And today we're going to be talking all about a framework that I use on the phone. And I'm going to get literally just give you a peek behind the curtain of my entire process. I'm just going to spill the beans. I'm going to give you all of the 101 of what you need to know as it pertains to selling high ticket on the phone. And this is something that I've been using since my days as a high ticket closer. It's been through some refinements. I've kind of added some pieces, removed some pieces as I've gotten more and more reps in having calls. And I honestly couldn't even tell you at this point how many calls I've had, because when I was a closer, I sometimes had, gosh, anywhere between, 5 to 7 calls a day. And so it's really something that I believe with anything, we have to get reps into it first before we ever should feel confident to teach it. And so I'm a big fan of really teaching things from a place of experience and not from a place of theory necessarily. And so anytime that I do teach something, I always want to make sure that I have this as a lot of data from it and a lot of insight from it. And so one of the things I want to say before we dive into today's framework is I think high ticket kind of gets like a bad rap. And even for me, when I first came into the online world and first came into my business, I felt kind of gross about it, if I'm going to be honest. Like I felt that classic thought process around high ticket, right? Of like high ticket is salesy, or like, you're asking for someone to like put down the equivalent of like a car payment, right? Or like a car deposit. And it felt when I first came into selling very transactional. I'll be honest. Like I was the classic person who was like, I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to be persuading. I don't want to objection handle. Like I had so much resistance. And a little story. So when I was a closer, I had that resistance because when I first went to get on sales calls, I didn't have any training. Like if you guys listen to the Power of the Pivot episode, which was one of our earlier ones, I talk about my journey and going through the different stages. And when I was a high ticket closer, like I didn't have a lot of training going into that position. It was something that I used the skill sets and the different tools and strategies that I'd learned actually in social work to be something that was an asset for me to help me to get people to open up, to help me to get people to kind of be like open in communication with me. And in doing so, I went into calls and I didn't really have an approach. I didn't really have a structure. So when I first learned through coaching of another mentor, like, hey, here's how we're going to sell on the phone. And this was years ago, by the way. Like I've been in business obviously for years at this point. And so the strategies I was taught then are not what they're teaching today, but it was very relevant to the times. And so, it really was about the fact of like, get the payment on the call, and like very much a matter of like pressure and basically trying to get like the sale to go through, like regardless of what it took kind of thing. Like it was really about like, why didn't they close? Why didn't they close? Like get them to close on the phone. And so there was this aspect of pressure. Like there definitely was a lens of me feeling like, yeah, just immense transaction connected to the call. And so even when I was a closer, I remember I was closing deals. I was getting people to, buy into $20,000 packages on the phone. And I remember them saying like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm just like talking to people. Like I'm just trying to like, unpack where they're at, what they're looking to do. Also did a lot of education, which was considered a massive no-no in sales. It was considered giving them a band-aid in the sense of like giving them a baby solution. And so the fear being that if you added value, people wouldn't have any reason to hire you was the perspective. And that's something that took me a minute to get over, because that really does influence the framework we're talking about today. I really had to, navigate this situation of I have to enroll someone, but I can't tell them what I'm going to do for them. I just have to be like, hey, just trust me. When you get in, you'll see A, B, C, D, E. And that was kind of an issue for me because I remember being on the client side of that. I remember being on, investments that I wanted to make. And I was like, so like, what exactly are we going to do together? And the person basically being like, well, yeah, when you get in, we'll talk about, strategy, and we'll definitely unpack the following. And I kind of remember in my head being like, So really, I don't know what I'm buying here. Like, I genuinely have no idea what I'm buying into. And I even hear this from people who come to me now and invest with me who are like, hey, like I bought into so and they either weren't open to getting on the phone with me, or when I did get on the phone with them, they weren't actually forthcoming about like what it meant for us to work together, i.e., what our strategy would be, like what would we be doing. And so I was like, there has to be another way. There has to be a way for, sales to still happen because obviously it's the goal of a sales call. But there has to be a way for sales to happen, but also for the person who's on the call to be like immensely served in this. And then also to feel like it feels like a comfortable environment, right? Like no one feels good, nor the closer or the client going into a call when they feel like there's this kind of like big elephant in the room and this kind of like underbelly of a transaction that's trying to happen the entire time. And so, what I've realized in phase from high ticket phone closer and doing calls on the phone with that, then leading into my own business, I had a sales program as one of my first programs coming out of being a closer. And I taught in that versus now being multiple years into my business, multiple 7-figure business. This framework I'm going to high level go over for you today is the same framework that I use to close packages of anywhere between $10,000 to $100,000. Like this framework will close up to a 6-figure deal if you use it correctly. Now, I want to preface this. This is something that I usually teach in multiple sessions. And so we're going to kind of go over at high level today. So if you go to do this on a call and you're kind of like, okay, the first call didn't close, the thing I also want to tell you about reps of sales is successful because of reps. It's like anything. If you go to do a workout for the first time, or you go to maybe think about that time you filmed on camera for the first time, right? Those are things that get easier and easier over time. And this process that I'm also going to go over with you also gets easier over time. And so I have refined this, as I said, over a while now. And there's a lot more that I probably will refine over it in the next, 3 years. But what I do know to be true is that sales calls work. I don't care what kind of business you are. I don't care, what kind of stage of business you're at. I think sales calls are probably one of the most valuable skill sets for someone to be able to master. And that is because it's the fundamentals of what we need to be able to do, which is the fact that sales is the ability to be able to effectively communicate what it is that you do, to be able to have the other person on the other side of the phone see the value in what you do for them and take that as clarity as to why they should invest. If you cannot effectively do that, you don't know how to effectively sell. And so my goal is to take this framework today and give you the high level of what you need to start to lean into and put those reps into so you can learn to sell. And here's the thing. If you're like, well, Kate, I hate sales and I don't want to be salesy and I don't like selling. Selling and your relationship to selling is very much a byproduct of your perspective, not of the selling itself. And that's because at the end of the day, we're being sold to every single day. When you go to the Starbucks drive-thru and they say, hey, any breakfast this morning? You're like, wow, thanks for asking, but no, I'm good. You don't feel like she's upselling me, right? You don't feel pressure all the time with sales. It's a matter of how it's facilitated that's more important than the fact that it is being done. And so that's my perspective with this framework is I want to give you a different way to facilitate selling so it feels good for you, it feels good for the person on the other side of the phone, and it also gets you the outcomes you're looking for in your business. This framework, I also want to preface, has been something that I have literally had people thank me after being on a sales call with me. I've had people who were like, by the way, that call was so helpful. Thank you so much. And felt like it was basically a coaching call, i.e., aspects of clarity, getting, nuggets of downloads, getting, different clarity pieces of what they could act on. That happened because of the call. And so this call can be just as much about service as it can be about scaling your business and selling. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the framework that we use to sell high ticket either on the phone or as I do myself on Zoom. So, the first stage of the process when you hop on the phone with someone, and probably I would say one of the most influential pieces that's going to determine how that call goes is rapport. And one of the things I tell people is listen, you don't build rapport by talking about the weather, right? When we go to a cocktail hour and we have people who are talking about, oh yeah, so like so where do you live? And it's a very small talk. it feels like you're just trying to pass time and both parties feel uncomfortable. And so one of the most important things you can do in building rapport is try to do something that's a little bit more personalized. So the way that I do this is I actually investigate the people. That's maybe a weird word to use, but it really technically is what I'm doing. I investigate the people I'm going to get on the phone with. So what I mean by that is I have an application process to get on the call with me. There's a step before getting on a call with me, but it's part of our process. And so the application gives me a high level of information about them. It might give me their email, it gives me their Instagram handle, it gives me just like a snapshot of some aspect of information. Or for you, it might be like a proposal kind of process or intake form to get on a call with you. Whatever it might be, I want you to use that information in whatever lens you get it. So if you, for example, are getting their Instagram handle, if you're getting their core pain points with their business, if you're getting their desires with whatever goal you're helping them with, I want you to note some of those things down. Because the thing that I know is that when we are building rapport, when we're building connection with somebody, we want it to be personalized. We don't want it to feel like it's basically just a bunch of small talk. And so rapport for me is finding something in their intake, finding something in their whatever they've submitted to me to go then do a little bit deeper of research. And when I say research or investigation, I'm not talking about hours here, okay? I'm talking about take a 60 seconds on a timer and just go see what you can find out about them. I find out that they have a lab, and so do I. I find that they love surfing. I find that they, just recently come home from vacation to Europe. Whatever it might be, find something to love about them. Because also, what it's doing is it's creating a connection that's outside of the purpose of why you're there, but also like human to human. Why are we connecting today? What can I find to love about you? And when I've done this on calls, it just really allows an even deeper human connection than most people have when they're on consults, because most people go into a consult only thinking about the outcome and the transaction in front of them and absolutely nothing else. So rapport for me is important. And really what you want to associate rapport with is research. And then also when you get on the call, creating space for connection. I, as part of coaching, audit sales calls. So like when people have, consultations for agencies or for coaches or consultants, or even some of the in-person businesses that I work with, like naturopath clinics, like they have consults and I will say like, hey, I want you to send me a recording of the consult you had. And it's interesting because when I watch these calls, I'll see people who are just like rushing to be like, okay, well, anyways, yes. So, and go right into the meat of the conversation. And for me, I'm like, take a breath, take a second to tune into the person. We're not talking, 25 minutes, but take 2, 3, 5 minutes just to say, hey, how's it going? I was going through your stuff and I was just kind of, taking a peek before we hopped on today. And I saw you just got back from Europe. How was that? Where did you guys end up going? Like, go to actually seek to understand. Also shows that when you ask people to be able to talk about themselves, they feel an even deeper connection than if you go into a call and you make the entire process and the steps entirely about yourself. And so rapport for me is taking the initial first moment to take a breath. Don't think about the outcome. Don't think about, oh, I gotta, talk about the price and this and the structure of whatever. Go in and just allow some space for that person to be able to connect with you. And again, do a little bit of research before going into the call. One thing I want to add to this is too, because I do see this a lot. If you have someone that has a very unique name, a name that maybe isn't like standard or common, I also really recommend asking that person how to pronounce their name at the beginning of the call. So rapport really is going to be the first step of creating that connection and making sure that you're actually thinking person to person before you ever dive into any of the rest of the structure, okay? So stage 2 in the call is going to be what I consider to call like the frame setting of the call. Frame setting is wildly important because what I see when people don't set frame is that the person that they're on the phone with ends up really taking charge of, to be honest, the entire call. You're not seeing a natural progression of the call. So you're having people, for example, where you feel like you're getting on the phone and they're instantly like, great. So like, let's talk about it. What are the details? Like, let's get to it. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't want to go there yet in the conversation, but they're kind of taking the lead. Or you find maybe that they're even asking you questions instead of you asking them questions. All of those are common symptoms that are a result of a lack of frame within a call. And so the frame really is a almost like a setting of intentions for your time together. And it's beneficial because not only does it help you to communicate to the person you're on the phone with what's going to happen, but what it also does is by setting frame, we're also calming their nervous system. So like think about being the client going into a call, right? So like you're, kind of on edge, you're wondering what are we going to cover? What are they going to ask me? So by also you pre-handling what's going to unfold, you're basically indirectly saying, I'm going to kind of run the call here. We're going to cover the following things. And yes, we're going to get to all the different packages and supports and price point and all of those things. But to start, I would love to dive into A, B, and C. And so when you're in frame, you also, when I note the aspect of pre-handling, you want to pre-handle anything that could potentially create a resistance for your call as well. So, for example, if you have an hour blocked off with somebody, it's usually suggested or preferred to say, hey, I know we have the next hour together. Does that still work for you? To kind of, go till about 4 o'clock. That's a way for them to also have the opportunity to say, actually, no, I got to dash, half an hour early and go to this other meeting. And then at that moment, you have an opportunity to say, okay, well, do I want to continue with this call or do I want to reschedule the call potentially? You also can note things like if you're recording the call, who gets that recording? Where is that recording going? Those are things that you can be sure to kind of note. So if someone is curious or potentially worried or concerned about it, that you can address those. Another big one that I address is taking notes. So for me, when I'm on consults with people, I do take notes in my notebook of just like kind of core things they say. And so I always want to make sure that I'm letting them know because no one likes that feeling when you like go to a therapist and you share something and they're like, okay. And then they write it down and you're like, what are you writing down? So that's something that I always make sure that I pre-address. So I'm going to like riff freestyle almost as to kind of the high level of what, for example, a frame with myself might look like. So again, I address the fact that we, again, have the hour together. Are you good until such and such time? The meeting is being recorded. That mainly is just that if for whatever reason we want to come back to the conversation that we had together or, should we decide that we want to work together, this is going to be something I reference to kind of help us with next steps. So a one-on-one of a frame would be like after rapport and going through all of that, would be something along the lines of, so amazing, like obviously very excited to dive in today, super, super high level of kind of the one-on-one of what we're going to do. So I like to run these calls pretty casually. It's really just a place for us to connect, to dive into a little bit of the one-on-one and what's going on with your business. So would love to dive in first of, kind of where you're at right now, what you've been experiencing, and really just get kind of like a current state, if you will, of your business and where you're at. After that, would love to dive into, what is you're looking to do? So what you're looking to achieve, some of the goals you have and things you're going for with your business and for yourself. With that, also would love in noting those things to me and sharing that with me to also tell you, you will see me taking notes. I do have the classic entrepreneur squirrel brain, and it basically means that as you share things with me, things are going to come up as ideas that I want to share with you. And so what I'll do is I'll note those down because I also, which is the next piece, want to circle back to my thoughts for your strategy. So today you're going to share a lot of the one-on-one of kind of, what you're doing. And I have a lot of thoughts and feedback I love to add to you to kind of make sure that, strategy-wise, say we were going to work together, that we are on the same page of some of the different things that I'd see for you and for your business. And so with all of that being said, of course, toward the end, we definitely will talk about, should we be a good fit, about different programs and support and coaching and investment and all of that. But the main intention today is really just to make sure that we get you clarity for your business, where you're at right now, where you want to go, and how we can make sure that we get you there. So does that sound good to you? And I would do something that basically gets a confirmation from them. Now, granted, that's off the top of my head and has no context to like me sitting down in front of a person. But you'll see there, I addressed how much time we have together. I addressed that I'm taking notes. I talked about, don't worry, we're going to get to the investment in the programs. I talked about where you are now, where you're going. I want to ask about those things. I really just covered, hey, here's what's going to happen on the call together. And I've never had a person say no when I ask them those questions. But I'm just getting buy-in to basically say, hey, does that sound good to you? And then we proceed from there. This is really the setting of the stage of what's going to happen. It calms nervous systems. It puts you in the lead seat and the driver's seat of this conversation and the flow of how it's going to go. And overall is something that will really, really help to give you better structure and frankly, better frame. When we say like you want to hold the frame of a call in sales, it means you also want to take the lead. You want to take the structure of the call. in your time together to make sure that you're really leading the conversation. Okay. So once we discuss frame, we really set the intention of what's kind of happening and how it's going to all go down. Then we want to go into understanding of their current reality. Now, a lot of times I find, and again, consults that I've reviewed at this point, I have reviewed dozens, if not potentially 100 plus at least sales calls of my clients in all different types of industries. The thing that I see as a big disconnect is that people are not diving into problems enough. And not in the sense of, you trying to just like pick to find problems, but more a matter of clarifying the problem that they express. So what I really suggest is that you go through all the last, 10, 15, however many consults you've had in your business, and you go through and you really pick out the core themes of the problems that people express to you. So for me, people express the fact they want to make more money, they want their marketing to work better, they want to really fix their product suite, they want to have help or adjustment with their mindset. There's a multitude of things that they're working on, but I really have typically always seen them fall into like under 10 buckets of problems that people experience. So when someone says to me, I'm really struggling with sales, I'm not making sales. Most people will note down not making sales as the pain point, but realistically, that's not actually an understanding of that person's problem. When someone says, I'm not making sales on a sales call, that's not enough for us to be able to say, okay, great, got it, noted. We need more details. So like when you say you're not making sales, like, what is the typical sales number that you guys are going for versus where are you guys at right now? And, when you say you're not making sales, is that through your application? Are you guys doing it in DMs? Like, kind of tell me about that. And, when you say you're not making sales, okay, so it's on the phone. Got it. So when you guys are doing phone calls, like what kind of is the close rate there? Like, how long has that been the case? Oh, okay. So you've got a 10% close rate. Okay, great. So how long has that been that way? Oh, okay, 6 months. And are you yourself doing the calls? Right? Like I'm getting an understanding of the domino here, which is like, is this maybe been their close rate for sales has been down for 6 months? Maybe I'm finding out that the close rate isn't actually an issue with them closing, but their closer that they hired. Ever since they hired them, the close rate has decreased, right? I'm really seeking to understand and getting curious. And what I really look to do is I think about pain points when people discuss these on a call like an onion. So the person is going to present to you on a sales consultation a 101 of like, hey, here's my problem. And the thing that I feel like nobody seems to do is really unravel it, which is to say, great, give me details about that. And the details can be specifics of better understanding the problem. But the other bucket that it also falls into is either the information, so getting you more details about understanding their problem, or being able to, the other I is impact, which is looking at how is this problem impacting their business. So when I ask questions about, how long have you guys been struggling with sales? And they say, oh, like 6 months, that really tells me, okay, whoa, they've been in a serious resistance for over 6 months now. That's something that, again, we want to dive into, we want to address. So I'm looking to better understand with information the actual details of the problem. And then I'm also going into the impact of it. So what we typically want to do in a consultation is get a couple of these. So visually, I want you to think about almost like outlining buckets on a piece of paper, like almost like a chart. A table, sorry. And so you would have kind of like, okay, sales is problem number 1, mindset's problem number 2, marketing's problem number 3. And these again are for my business. But for you, you would want to think about what are the common 3, 5, maybe 7 different problems that people present to you on calls. And how can we make sure that we note down questions that would help us to better unravel those? So what we typically would recommend to clients, and we have exercises and resources to do this, but for you, a high level of how to do this is to say, okay, well, what's the problem? And what's a series of questions that helps me to get to the root, the center of that onion, if you will, of the core of what that person's experiencing. And what we do is we pre-create some questions that help us to do that. So then you're not on the call being like, okay, well, like, how do I get curious? How do I investigate? We're actually going to have some pre-created resources that will help you to dive deeper into that. So once we get a snapshot of understanding where they're currently at, so what's the current state of their situation? What have they been doing until now to try to fix their problem? Like really kind of unraveling, again, anywhere between 3 to 5 typically on a call we're looking for to see core problems. And again, the information around them and the impact they're creating on their business or their problem that you're responsible to solve. Once we know that, we then want to go into and say, okay, great. I feel like I have a good understanding of kind of where you're at right now with, X, Y, and Z. That really gives me a good picture of kind of the current state of where we're at. So tell me a little bit about like where you want to go. Like, what's the goal? What are we looking to achieve? Like, if you were like in a dream place in the next, 3 to 6 months, I want to be here. Tell me a little bit about that. And people, again, will give you a very surface goal. Like, one of the things that I always hear is like, I want to hit this income marker. And I'm like, I love that. Amazing. Okay, so you want to hit 7 figures. Awesome. Curious, like, why 7 figures specifically? Like, when you say I want to hit 7 figures, like, what does that look like to you? And they're like, well, I want to be able to do this, this, this with my life. And I'm like, okay, amazing. And so, like, again, question around the business. Like, when you think about the 7-figure business, what do you see? Like, is there a certain kind of style you want the business to be? Is there a certain amount of hours you want to be working? Like, really, if you were going to think like wave a magic wand, I have the business that I want, what would that look like in the business? And so again, you'll see here, I'm getting details of what their goal is. Because here's the thing, hitting 7 figures, let's just take this as an example. Hitting 7 figures is a very high level goal. And what I mean by that is it's a very generic goal. I want to hit 7 figures. They may want to hit 7 figures so that they could be a stay-at-home mom with their kids. They might want to hit 7 figures so that they could donate to a charity that they really believe in. They might want to hit 7 figures so that they can become an author and like a big brand on like big stages and, known worldwide with their brand. I don't actually know why they want 7 figures. So if I just took it as, oh, okay, 7 figures, great, and I don't get curious, what ends up happening is you're selling to them, or you're basically connecting your product or your support to their goal. But the thing is, you don't actually understand their goal. So their goal might be rooted in their family. And then when you communicate the offer, you're talking to them about it in the sense of like, oh, look how much money it's going to make you. Or look at what's going to do for your marketing. When really, Sarah, who you might be on the phone with, is like, well, it's not really about the marketing. Like, for her, it's about her kids. So we need to understand what someone's goal is and how is what we offer or provide something that ultimately supports with their goal. And so it has to be personalized though. Just the high level of, oh, this is just what I want to achieve or this is what I want to do is just simply not enough. We have to make sure that we personalize it. So by getting curious, you have a much, much, much higher likeliness of connecting what that person's doing to the goal that they actually want to achieve and what matters to them, not just what we're telling them to care about. So again, think back to Sarah. She is somebody who really cares about her family as her big aspect of why she's investing. So if I tell her, hey, you should invest because of what it's going to do for your following, she doesn't care, which means she doesn't see how what I do fits to help her to achieve what she cares about. So getting curious about where they're at and getting curious about where it is they want to go and what they're trying to achieve, we need details, because without the details, you most likely are going to fall into this place of selling them something that they don't actually want because it's not actually something they value or that's important to them. So with that, then I want to go a little bit into the next step, which is, okay, I have a good understanding of kind of where you're at right now and what you're currently doing. And I also feel like I have a good snapshot now of where it is you're looking to go and kind of some of the goals you're working toward. So for me, I now then want to kind of go and dive deeper into, well, what's the disconnect specifically that you feel? This is the most important piece here, that they feel is their disconnect. So when you're hearing someone, you're an expert in what you do, right? So you talk to people who have these situations every single day. And when you talk to people who have this problem, you kind of are listening to them and you're like, oh, I know what your problem is, right? Like someone might come, for example, on a fitness consult and be like, oh, my issue is nutrition and my exercises. And you're like, no, it's consistency, right? But you knowing what their problem is very different than them knowing what their problem is. And so when we go into what the roadblock is, i.e., what are the things that are causing them to not be consistent and to get toward the goals that they want, we have to look at, what do they think their issue is? Never tell, always ask. I would not want to say something like, you don't need more leads. You need more people to stay in the offer. So if you just fix the retention, here's what I think we should do. We should fix the retention. You should do this, this, this. We get people to stay inside the offer, and that will double how many people are inside. right? That's me telling you. That's me saying, hey, you think this, but here's how it's going to go. This is what I suggest you do. You never want to tell, you always want to ask. And the reason that we do that is when people answer us, they are ultimately themselves agreeing to the plan being put in place. It's not something I'm planting. They're coming up with it with me, which again means we're already in collaboration, we're already in partnership, and we're already building trust. So this is us two collaborating on an idea, which is ultimately what's going to happen inside of the service when you guys work together, right? So this is just a preview of what it's going to be like when you guys collaborate. So you never want to plant an idea because then it's not actually theirs. So you don't want to tell, you always want to ask. So I just want to give you a quick snapshot, a quick summary, right? So we can remember these stages. Stage 1, we've got rapport, which is building that connection. Stage 2, we're setting the frame, which is the agenda and the overall intention of the call, and also pre-handling any objections or resistances that may come up. We're then going to go into the reality, which is where they're currently at now, going into the result of where it is that they ultimately want to go. And then we've covered roadblocks, which is really helping us to see what they believe to be their problem, and then bridging the gap between their belief and our belief and kind of seeing, okay, well, like, are we on the same page here as to what the disconnect is, or maybe they totally in a different direction? If so, how can we kind of get us both on the same page and better clarify what the disconnect might be? Now, the next stage is what we consider to be the review. And the review is really where, for me as a closer, this is the time where I would have most of my, clients or prospects, if you will, cry. And not that the goal, by the way, is to make people cry, but I would have a lot of people cry at the stage because it's a very powerful step. When I've said this to people on calls, it's me communicating everything that I just heard them say to me about where they are and where they want to go and the roadblocks of why they're not there. And they're hearing all of this back to them for the first time. And it's one thing to say our goals, right? It's one thing to say our resistances or say our problems or say the things that we want to achieve. But to hear it all come back to us is really, really intense. And so what I do is I basically say, listen, I just want to quickly, make sure that I understand the high level of everything. What I heard you say was, and I go through and I list out the high level things that they shared with me and the big takeaways or insights that they shared with me. And so what I'm doing during this time is I say, here's kind of what I heard you say. Does that sound about right? Or is there anything maybe that you want to even add that you feel like we didn't get to cover just yet? That helps me to kind of take a gauge, which is like when I share that with them, do they say, nope, that sounds like exactly what I'm going through? And like, honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. Are they someone who maybe says, I don't know if we talked about it, but I definitely would want to add blank, and they add in something else. Like, this is an opportunity for you guys to really be on the same page as to what the disconnect is, what they're struggling with, and make sure that before you move forward into talking about anything offering wise, that we're really acknowledging, where they're at right now and all of the things that they've shared up until this point. So we're going to do a little bit of a review. And then after that, we go into the next step, which is the outcome. So this section of outcome has been something that I have refined over the last couple of years, because this is the section technically where I teach. And what I mean by teach is I educate people on what I'm going to do for them. So my process around quote unquote, I hate using this word, but like technically is what it is, closing. My process around closing is basically to take the person that I'm talking to and the conversation that I'm having, and I'm looking to say, here's the pain point you expressed to me. Here's the thing you're struggling with. Here's what I would do specifically to fix that, in the sense of the things that I would be looking at or kind of like high level trying to dive into to help you to be able to overcome XYZ issue. And this stage, by the way, of outcome is something that's kind of like controversial, because people sometimes are very, very adamant that they do not believe in adding quote unquote value on calls. Like, they, again, are from the mindset of like, you'll find out once you get in the offer. And here's the way to do this correctly. What you're talking about is what you see and what you could see as opportunities of things to be done. But the main area where this is valuable is why. So for me, I might say to someone, back to our example earlier, here's the thing, right? So one of the things that you mentioned to me is that you do want to make more sales, which I 100% agree with. Like, I always want to make sure that we're scaling revenue. Here's the thing though, right? One of the things that I would be looking into is not only increasing your leads, because we always want to make sure we're getting new people in the pipeline, but we also want to make sure that if we have them coming into the pipeline, we're not losing them. So one of the things that I would be focusing on is making sure that we actually have a really intentional onboarding, client delivery, and offboarding experience, and actually going through the actual back-end customer journey of how you're serving people. because right now you are losing a lot of sales and potential sales and business and therefore revenue in the behind the scenes of your business. And so because of that, it's putting a lot of pressure, which 100% makes sense. It's putting a lot of pressure on having to need more leads, more sales, more marketing, right? Always coming in on the front end. But the thing that I also want to say is if we were to just really refine the way that you're currently delivering to clients, get them better results, better retention, more referrals, more renewals, that even in itself would double your business, even if you had no more new marketing and you didn't put any changes on the front end of what you're doing right now. So for me, that's one of the things that I think would really, really help you when it comes to relieving some of the sales pressure and also some of that lead pressure you mentioned to me. That's something that I would say to somebody who I'm trying to tell them a little bit about the outcomes I would help them to achieve, right? So what I'm doing there, I didn't tell them how. I didn't tell them nitty gritty of here's exactly what we're going to do. I said, here's what I'd focus on and here's why I would focus on that. So the thing with the outcome is the outcome's job of this stage of the call is really very much designed to help somebody to better understand and better be educated around exactly what it is that you're going to do to support them. And also with this, we talk a little bit around our framework too. So you can use the fact that, for example, for me, I have a framework that's called attract, convert, deliver, automate, and expand. And so when this person says to me, hey, I really need more leads, I'm like, listen, in our framework, we talk about attract, convert, deliver, right? So you mentioned to me you want more leads. We do dive into always making sure that you're getting more people seeing you through our attract pillar and what we do. But deliver, this is where that would come in. It would be really looking at the client experience, the client delivery, and how that's a massive opportunity for you to scale, even outside of the refinements that we can make inside of marketing. So the outcome side is really what we consider to be the basis of education-based sales. And education-based sales is really not withholding. There's no bait and switch. There's no only when you pay me will you know. There's none of that. It empowers the person on the other side of the phone to feel like they understand wholeheartedly what they're investing into and what they're buying. Because I just found after having so many conversations with peers and also clients and just so many people in my world who were feeling like they were investing into things, but they genuinely had no idea what they were buying. That was something that over time, after having more and more reps of doing that they just realized, you know what? I want to buy into something that I feel like I actually am clear on, that I'm educated on. I actually know what's happening and what I'm buying. And so I think the education piece is really just such a massive game changer in the way that people experience your calls. And again, the reason I love doing this on calls is because we end up being on the same page of what it's going to look like to work together. So we actually start to understand, if we were to, for example, continue together, what is that going to look like and what are we going to work on? So the next piece, and this is the second last one, is going to be the process of exactly what it looks like. So here's the thing. When we're talking about an offering and we're starting to introduce, okay, here's what we're going to do together. Does that kind of sound like what you're looking to do? The next step is really how you're going to do it. The process you're going to use to get them the outcome, right? So we just covered outcomes. Now we're going to go into the process. This is where you're going to say, listen, based off of everything that I've heard today and kind of where we're at and some of the things that we're looking to do, I really do think XYZ package would be best for you. And here's why. Inside that program or inside that service, what we really focus on doing is A, B, and C. And so when we talk about an offer, you always want to talk about the offer first in presenting it as a problem that's solved, not as a package. So I wouldn't say to somebody, I definitely think you should join our 6-month ITI Accelerator Mastermind because that definitely is something that will help you to get to your goals. I would say, in kind of going over everything you shared with me today, I really would recommend kind of knowing where you are right now and where you want to go. Our ITI Accelerator Mastermind. It's a 6-month mastermind, but the reason I recommend this, I think more than anything else we've got, is it really is going to hit all the things that you're working on. It's going to help you with the track, convert, deliver, automate, and expand. All those 5 pillars are going to be covered inside that program. You will have that duality of that one-on-one support you mentioned that you're interested in, but also having that group and that community feel as well. And it's also something I think with the things you mentioned to me about developing your course and your passive, a lot of the funnel templates and the passive trainings that are in there are going to be a massive resource for you to be able to get really quick traction on that in the next, couple months. And this also for where you're at right now is actually designed for people who are looking to achieve X, which is exactly where you are. And so I think you're really going to be in a great spot in the sense of the goals you're working toward and the way in which you want to get there by joining ITI Accelerator. So I would be talking about the process, but I'm talking about it in the sense of how is this product or this program or this service going to help this person to solve specific problems? When people talk about their packages, they talk about like my bronze package, my silver package, or my X mastermind, or my X VIP day, or intensive, or course, or whatever. But no one cares about the product. People care about what the product is going to help them to solve. And like I even see this not even out in sales calls, but I also see this in proposals. When people send proposals, the proposals often have like XYZ package number 1, package number 2. Tell me what problem those packages solve. Package number 1 is designed for the person who's looking to achieve blank and is struggling with X, Y, and Z, right? We really want to be able to have problem statements associated with each one of our offers because it allows us to effectively and easily communicate exactly why someone should invest in that for where they are today and what they want to achieve. So inside process as well, you'll say, I suggest XYZ offer. And so some of the ways, that we would support you in being able to get some of those outcomes we mentioned would be blank. And that's where you would start to discuss the features, which everybody loves to dive into. You get this amount of calls, you get this amount of messages, you get this amount of whatever. Those pieces of you get this, you get that, you definitely still need to mention. People need to know what they're buying. But we need to make sure that we're talking about even those features in the lens of, again, why should someone care? So to my features, it might be, so for example, one of the first things that happens when you join Accelerator is you do get a kickoff call. It's a 1-hour kickoff call where we really deep dive into your blueprint for your business. And that's because we don't have a standardized blueprint we put everyone through. It very much is a customized strategy for you and for your business to scale. After that, you will also have monthly one-on-one calls, which are basically a monthly touch point to outline your focuses per month that will help you to do A, B, and C. Now, in between those, of course, you're going to have support. You do have twice weekly office hours where you can come in and do hot seat coaching around what you're working on week to week, right? Like you're seeing how I'm talking about what they're getting, but also why is that helpful in an instance where they're having a problem? Or if I'm talking about Slack and the fact we have Slack support, I might say something along the lines of, listen, you're obviously also going to have moments where you have, questions that you'd love to ask and that you'd love to inquire about, but your call might not be for another week. And we don't ever want you to feel like you have to sit on a question or add it to your notebook and wait for your call. And so also in between, if you ever have questions that come up for you, we are in Slack Monday to Friday, diving in with you into your business to make sure we can get you clarity and movement each day as you're progressing through things. So I want to always make sure that we're talking about the features in connection to the problems they solve as well. And then comes in to our beloved last stage, which is price pitching. And price pitching is something that I help a lot of people with because I think that price is really that end portion of the call to me really does tell me your confidence level in when you pitch the price, your confidence level is so obvious. And I can tell you a very easy sign. When you say price, do you keep talking or do you just say the price and let them sit for a second? Because people who are uncomfortable in sales will be like, yeah, and it's $3,000 and we also have 2 payments of $1,500. And what ends up happening is you're like, yeah, so, and yeah, like, I think, this would be a really great program for you. And I really think just based on everything you told me, like, this is 100% what you need. And like, of course, yeah, like if you need anything with a payment plan, like we're absolutely happy to support you. And I'm like, Sarah, what are you doing? What are you doing? Shush. The rule of thumb is when you say the price, the first person to speak loses. That's the game that I'm playing in my head when I say price. That's because sales loves space. Sales loves space. When you do not allow space, you're not allowing people to feel and you're not allowing people to think. And so what I see is sometimes, I've seen this countless times on calls that I've audited, people have actually undone the deal because they've talked so and so and so and so much. Like I've seen people at the end of the call, the person's like, yeah, like I would love this. This sounds great. Like I'd love to get started. And then the person who's closing goes in this like dialogue about like, oh my God, yeah, like I would love to dive into this. Like I'm just so excited. And like, blah, blah, blah. And there's like going and going and going. I'm like, hey, shush, just allow the space and say, oh my God, I would love that. I'm so excited to get started. Are you okay if I kind of go over like 2 more minutes, just give you a little run through of kind of what's going to happen next? And that's it. When you have the price shared, often people, because they're so nervous, and again, I understand, which is why I said it the earlier part today, this is a matter of reps. When you are nervous and when you're kind of antsy, you fill space because you just feel so uncomfortable with it. And so one of the best practices that you can do is really vocalize your investment and talk about your offer and say, so as a result, here's the program that I recommend for you, or the package I recommend for you. Here's what it comes with. So for all of what I just noted, the total investment is blank. And I might say, 3K or 10K or 12K. And of course, we do have payment plans if that's supportive for you. Usually people will say, okay, well, what are the payment plans? I would say, absolutely. So the first payment plan is this, or we have payment plan B, which is the following. And they say, oh, okay, amazing. I'm like, yeah. And you take a second, because just like you wanting to fill the space, the person on the other side of the phone also may want to fill the space. So 9 times out of 10, they're going to speak first and say, yeah, I mean, I definitely think I want to do it. And they'll start to talk. But sometimes because you're talking so much, they don't have the space to actually say, well, I have a couple more questions or I have a couple more curiosities. And so I really want to say that going through today's framework, of course, this is very high level. This is usually taught in multiple different sessions and hours and workshops and feedback and all of these things. This is just the high level of the framework or the buckets that we have to hit on. And each one of these is one to master. But again, the high level being rapport, frame, reality, the end result, the roadblock keeping them from getting there, the review of everything they've shared, the outcome, the process, and then the price. And as I said earlier, this process has been just wildly influential. I have trained closers on other people's teams with this process. I use this process myself on calls. I actually use this process to create our DM selling framework as well, of how we're actually able to sell in the DMs with people. It's influenced quite a bit in our business with ourselves as well as our clients. And so when it comes to calls, what I want to say is none of us are born closers, okay? None of us are born as salespeople per se. And I think it's important that all of us recognize first our relationship with sales and how we feel about selling is probably the first place you want to start. But once you feel like you have really neutralized that relationship and you can get to a place where you see it as service, I really encourage you to go into your calls not thinking about yourself. Right? Like people tell me, Kate, I'm really nervous for this call or I'm nervous for this consultation. And what that tells me is you're really making it about you. You're making it about you, your offer, how you sound, how you communicate. When really, when you go in and make sure that person gets the clarity they need and that person feels heard and that person feels acknowledged and that person feels, like they've actually been supported, that's really success when it comes to your calls. And so that's really how I approach it with my calls. And again, it's done leaps and bounds for our business in the sense of what it has influenced for our sales, of course, but also for just the way that we do business and getting the outcome that we want, which is sales and scaling, but doing so in a way that feels good. And we feel like we're helping people and we're able to connect with people and they leave that quote unquote sales call feeling like they're on cloud 9 because they just got so much clarity. Like that's the essence, that's the goal of what we're going for. And this framework will allow you to do that. So listen, I would love if you would take this framework, note this down, flesh this out, and go practice. Go get on some calls. Go use this on your next couple consultations. Go use this on your next couple applications that come in. And of course, if there's anything that kind of downloaded for you today, or you feel like was a clarity piece around this framework or something, maybe you even realize that you are doing right now, or something you want to start to add in that you're like, I wasn't doing that before, and I think I need to do that. I would love to always hear from you guys. It means the world to me when you reach out in DMs and tell me either feedback of how this kind of resonates with you and also some of the amazing results that who you are, that you guys are taking. You're taking these frameworks, you're taking this insight and this wisdom and you're putting it into action. I've gotten so many amazing, messages from people who are like, I heard your pivot episode and I pivoted my business. And I'm like, yes, like it's just so absolutely incredible to see you embodying what it means to be ambitious. And when I called this podcast ambitious, it was originally with the mindset of trying to really resonate with the girl that I coach, the girl that I'm around day in, day out. And whether we're coaching together right now or not is not relevant. What matters is you have that in you. You have the essence of the qualities, which is why you're tuning into these each week, which is why you are taking these frameworks and you're executing them and you're taking the clarity and executing it. And I just really want to give you a massive pat on the back and a massive aspect of encouragement for doing that, because there's two different types of people. There's the people who listen to a podcast and listen to free information and are kind of like, okay, well, that was fun. Anyways, and they go to the next episode and they go about their life. But for me, I literally saw Gary Vee at a recent conference and I was almost in tears, because not just oh my God, Gary Vee, but Gary Vee because his podcast, when I was starting my business, was the thing that gave me confidence. I got ready every single morning and listened to Gary Vee. And it was something that gave me the boost that I needed to feel like I could keep going. And it was the place where I felt at home when I would listen to those episodes with what he shared and the insights he had and just all the pieces connected to it. And so I just want to say I'm also very proud of you. I'm proud of you for tuning in. I'm proud of you for working on yourself. I'm proud of you for taking the big actions that I know you're taking right now. I'm proud of you for facing your fears that I know you're navigating at this moment. I'm proud of you for navigating this season, which for a lot of people has been a tough one. I just want to say I see you. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you listening in and all of your amazing support. And as always, I love hearing from you. So if you have any downloads or clarity from today, I'd love to see you in the DMs. But with all that being said, we will see you next week. And as always, my girl, stay ambitious.